This Sunday, our service begins with a collect of the day that talks about petitions God for God's grace to precede and follow us, and that as a response to that we are led to good works. And that kind of sets the tone for the entire service, this idea of having God's providential grace in our lives and our response in thanksgiving and service. And that's, of course, really picked up in the gospel reading that we have, whereas Jesus is wandering through the countryside with his band of disciples. He encounters 10 lepers, and he heals them, sends them away to be healed, but only one comes back to give thanks. And he says, weren't all 10 healed? But really the gospel is much more fixated on the one that gives thanks rather than the 9 who forget. And again, it's calling us into a life of gratitude and a life of service. And you'll hear those themes over and over throughout the prayers and through the music all Sunday morning. At the sequence hymn, right before the gospel is read, right before the healing of the 10 lepers, we'll sing 2 short verses of a hymn, God of mercy, God of grace, show the brightness of thy face. And it reaches back to that opening collect, asking for God's grace to precede and follow us, as well as kind of foreshadowing the healing that's going to happen in the gospel lesson, especially in these phrases like, fill the church with light divine, and thy saving health extend unto earth's remotest end. This idea of God's health and salvation, that grace that will always precede and follow us. In our hymnal, this is matched with a very graceful tune from the early 20th century that's very, very singable. So even though that's not one of necessarily the old traditional hymns from hundreds of years ago, something that's really less than 100 years so far, it's still a very singable and easy melody to sing. And so I especially call your attention to those words. The anthems also pick up this idea of God's grace being with us and our response in thanksgiving and service. At the offertory, we will be singing a piece that's still only a couple of years old for our ensemble, a setting of an early American hymn, tune, and text called Sweet Rivers. And it has this sort of atmospheric way of introducing the tune. The piano comes in with sort of a dreamy little arabesque. And this choir sings that early American folk tune in unison. And it talks about finding our rest in Christ, just as those lepers did. At the communion, the choir will be singing an a cappella piece, a piece without accompaniment. That's a setting of words by George Herbert, the 17th century English priest and poet. King of glory, King of peace, I will love thee. And these are set to notes that were composed by the 20th century New York-based composer Harold Friedel. This is something the choir has done quite a bit, so you might even recognize it. It's a beautiful, evocative musical setting of these words. And if I could be permitted just a little bit of an advertisement, both of these anthems were placed in the choir's library through donations. The offertory anthem was given in thanksgiving for the ministry of our bishop, Brian Cole, and the communion anthem was given in memory of Heather Stagg's brother by Heather. And this is something that we would invite you, if you have a moment in your life that you want to mark, similar to the way we will give the altar flowers, we invite you to also place an anthem in the library. One of the nice things is, unlike the flowers, you give them 1 week and they're gone. every time we sing these pieces, we've sung both of these anthems a number of times, and every time we do, the intention is remembered in the prayers of the people and on the bulletin. So that's another way to think about how you might memorialize certain joys and events in your life as we all come together and respond with gratitude to Christ's grace in our lives.